Hey Waffle Gang, I do hope you are well. My name is Mark and today we're checking out some more relationship stories. If you do love a Reddit story, why not consider hitting that like, subscribe, maybe that notification bell too. It all really helps out the channel, and you can even join if you want to by clicking that join button down below or clicking the link in the description for Patreon and joining up there. Now, before we do jump into today's first story, I would just like to thank Winnie Rachmani and Journey Rose for your joins and rejoins to the channel. It really helps out, and just for everyone for being involved. Thank you so much. Now, I'd just like to give out some warnings before we go any further. It involves mental illness, abandonment, and manipulation. And whilst it's an incredibly long story with updates and packed full of information, and it is a wild ride, I came back to record this bit because it still felt at the very end like it was left on a bit of a cliffhanger as well, although you kind of get the feeling of where it might go. So just wanted to throw that out there, and let's crack on with today's story. It's from Boxfish Fan, who says, "My 28 female husband, 37 male of 2 years, blew up at me when I asked if I could be a working stay-at-home mum and accused me of being a horrible step-parent to his daughter, 8 female. I'm crushed. Is he right?" I'm posting from a throwaway account just in case my husband or any of my family and friends read this. I'm going to change a few details because I'm paranoid, but the story is the same. I'm a saleswoman and I do very well for myself. My husband and I have been married for 2 years now and together for 5. This is my first marriage and my husband's second. He has an 8-year-old daughter from his previous relationship and has always had full custody of her. Our dating life was tricky with him being a full-time single dad and having to work long hours, but we made it work. I met his daughter when she was 4 after we had been dating for a year. I've helped her get dressed and ready for school, done her hair, cooked her meals, helped with homework and soccer practice, taken her for ice cream dates, tucked her into bed, read her stories, etc. I'm not perfect and I've made mistakes, but overall, we've been a very happy family. When my husband and I got engaged, he asked if I would like to be a stay-at-home mum for Lizzie and any future children we had. At the time, I politely declined. I was doing well in my career, loved going to work, and thought of being home all day with a kid and doing nothing but housework and typical stay-at-home mum things didn't really tickle my fancy. My then fiancé was gracious, and we both assumed that was how it would be for any future children we had. Fast forward to now, and I am now 6 months pregnant with our son. I am on cloud 9. I am always in a permanent state of bliss, and something in me changed. I started thinking about being a stay-at-home mum, and suddenly it didn't seem so bad. I am in love with my son and want to spend as much time with him as I can. I know it's not all roses and champagne. There is actually a lot of poop, drool, screaming and exhaustion involved, but I can't really stand the thought of having 2 weeks maternity leave and then handing my son to a stranger in daycare. I've been thinking about this for months because I wanted to make sure this was something I really wanted and not wishful thinking. I weighed the pros and cons and spoke to my supervisor. I'm at the point in my career where I could work from home full time and stay with my son and pick my stepdaughter up from school. I certainly wouldn't mind watching her and doing more things with her too. The more I think about it, the more I want to try this. So after I put little Lizzie to bed tonight, I asked my husband if we could talk and excitedly broached my idea. I was very unprepared for his reaction. My husband is furious. He yelled that we agreed I wouldn't be a stay-at-home mum before we got married and it was bullshit I was changing my mind now. He said I was a rotten stepmother and I clearly loved our son more than Lizzie, and it was disgusting the obvious favoritism I was showing him. He also said I shouldn't be allowed to stay at home with our son if his daughter didn't get to experience it with me. For the record, Lizzie is very excited about her little brother and can't wait for him to be born. She's never expressed any kind of anxiety, sadness, or jealousy towards him or me. I was shocked and stunned. My husband is on the couch, his choice, and I'm here crying in our room. I am so very hurt by what my husband said. I know I'm not perfect, but I've really done the best for Lizzie that I could. I never thought I'd change my mind about being a stay-at-home mum when I got pregnant, but now I really, truly want to do this, and I wouldn't have to quit my job either, which is a double bonus. I am very hurt by what my husband said and frankly a little angry at his accusation. I do not love the baby more than Lizzie. I do love Lizzie, and while I admit I feel a deeper connection to this baby, I feel that is due to the fact that I'm going through the experience of pregnancy, and it's really hitting home for me. This baby is half me. But that doesn't mean I love Lizzie any less, it's just different. Is that really so wrong? Am I really a bad stepmom? I didn't plan on changing my mind, and again, I still plan to keep my job, and I don't mind taking extra care of Lizzie in addition to the baby. In fact, I think it might be a chance for us to grow closer and bond over the baby. I don't know what to say to my husband. I tried telling him all the things I've said here, including spending more time and growing closer to Lizzie, but all he did was yell louder and say more awful things about my parenting. I'm pretty crushed and honestly growing more angry by the minute. I feel that I am a good stepmom to Lizzie, and she seems to think so too. The only one who seems to have a problem is my husband. Now hopefully I'm not mistaken in this, from what I've read, you wouldn't even be a stay-at-home mum anyway, because you're working from home, you're going to be working still, so in some ways to me it feels like it doesn't really matter. You're still doing the same thing that you was doing in the office, but at home, and having extra time to deal with the children and get involved in their lives as well. I can only see that as a positive, and I'm just gonna reach out on this one and try and take a guess basically, because we don't know the full ins and outs, but we knew that, OP met the daughter when the daughter was 4 years old. We found out that the father had full custody of her, but I guess we don't know what point that was from. So I just wonder, if the husband is feeling bad because his daughter had like a bit of a unstable maybe upbringing. That might be unfair to say because I don't really know. And maybe like he's projecting all these feelings now of what he tried to give his daughter when she was younger, but now OP in this situation has turned around and says, she does want to spend more time with her child and be at home with the baby. And I'm not blaming OP for that at all. I'm just sort of saying, maybe that's why the husband was feeling that way. I'm not saying it's right to be feeling that way. I'm just trying to understand. Might be totally wrong as well. So maybe just some projecting and some guilt and stuff like that. But we do have those updates as well, and we'll cover a couple of comments before we move on. Mr. Pedder says, a lot of good discussion here, but I just wanted to chime in to say working from home is not the same as being a stay-at-home mum. Working from home is still working. It's pretty much impossible to effectively focus on your work with an infant in the house. You'll have to have some daycare or other assistance. It's also impossible to do all the housework that would be expected of a stay-at-home mum. So I'm not sure you framed this discussion correctly. You're not staying at home doting on son all day. You're continuing your career just in a way that makes your schedule considerably more flexible. Lots of women do this with the second kid, even if the first kid was a bio kid. The second just becomes too much. Picking up 2 from daycare and school, staying home with sick kids, or snow days, or during breaks that aren't scheduled for the same time. A deleted user says, by the time your son is 4, you might well want to work in an office. A newborn is very different from a preschooler, and parenting 2 kids is very different from parenting 1 kid. You're also a different person than you were 4 years ago. The situation is different and you're allowed to change your mind. You should ask your husband if he's really so angry at you for not being able to see into the future, that he's willing to punish you, your son, and your daughter for it. If he is, I think marriage counselling would help. If I was in your position, I would need to work really, really hard at not growing to resent your daughter. It's not her fault, but every time I would hand off my 2-week-old baby to a stranger, my first reaction would be, this is my punishment for not taking care of my stepdaughter when she was a newborn. I'm being punished for my inability to time travel. Honestly, I think the resentment would kill the marriage eventually. I hope your husband realizes this eventually. And let's have one more from Lucy and Diamonds, who says, called me nuts, but to me it sounds like OP's husband is more angry at himself than her. From the sounds of it, Lizzie's bio mum is not in the picture and OP is her mum rather than a secondary parent. Perhaps the husband feels guilt that this baby is going to have a more stable early life with 2 parents that just wasn't possible for Lizzie. I don't believe the husband is so obtuse to believe that staying at home with a 4-year-old is on par with staying at home with a newborn. 4-year-olds mostly sleep through the night. They don't require to be fed from a breast or bottle every 2 to 3 hours. They can use the bathroom on their own. They are far less likely to catch an illness. I'd be willing to bet OP's husband feels a sense of guilt, or that he failed his first child in a way and has taken it out on OP. Now, we're going to move on to the first update to see what that says. So this update is 2 weeks later. Thank you for all the kind and supportive messages on the last post. It was really helpful, as well as some of the possible suggestions as to why my husband suddenly blew up at me. I did get some nasty PMs from what sounded like bitter single dads, which only further convinced me my husband was being an absolute irrational jerk. To address some of the questions that were asked in the last post. At the time my husband asked me to be a stay-at-home mum, we were not married, nor was I at a place in my career where I could have worked from home. I would have had to quit my job, which I did not want to do, to be a parent to a child that wasn't mine, to a man I wasn't married to, but would have full financial dependence on. So that was a huge no-go for me, but even after we were married, it took a while to still get to a place where I wouldn't have to quit my job to be a stay-at-home parent. To those who were saying I couldn't expect to work full-time and from home and to take care of an infant and grammar school girl, you're right. Maybe I worded it wrong or just didn't go into the full details in my post, but while I would be working from home and I can do it without having to quit, I would be working part-time instead of full-time. My supervisor is 100% fine with this, so I would have 2 weeks maternity leave and then I would be working from home part-time. While I will take a cut in pay, my company is great and is letting me keep full benefits despite part-time hours. I know my husband isn't worried about finances because even if I quit, he makes more than enough to comfortably support us. I just love working too much to completely quit, but my son is definitely a priority to me. Lizzie's mum is in the picture, but just barely. She has borderline personality disorder, drinks like a fish, and is just basically an irresponsible party animal. She sees Lizzie maybe one weekend a month if she isn't too hungover or stoned to make an effort. The only nice thing I can say about her is that at least she makes child support payments on time, minuscule as they are. Lizzie doesn't like her very much and has made it clear she prefers me to her mother. I can't say I blame her, the poor dear. So I went to bed that night very angry after my crying jag, because I love Lizzie and have been a great mum to her. The next couple of days were very quiet. I was distant but polite to my husband and still warm and cuddly with Lizzie. I didn't really want anything to do with him. My husband started picking on everything I did for Lizzie around the house. Started saying more things like, "Why are you bothering?" and "That's not how this should be done." And "I bet that makes you feel just great." I had enough. After I put Lizzie to bed, I told my husband I was sick of his nasty attitude and he was setting a toxic environment for his daughter, and that if he had something to say, he should say it. He started to yell and scream again, but I put my foot down this time. I said I want to work through whatever problems we have and get this issue resolved because I love you and care about you, but I will not take toxic, abusive behavior. I will not talk to you until you're ready to be respectful and kind. My husband lost it even more and screamed, "I'm sleeping on the couch." So I said, "Excuse me? I'm heavily pregnant with your son and every part of me hurts. I need access to the bathroom when I wake up at night. I will be sleeping in the bed. You can either join me if you can be quiet or you can sleep out here." He seemed kind of taken back and I just left and went to bed. I guess he slept on the couch. The next day after Lizzie went to bed, I said I think we need to set up an appointment with a marriage counsellor. My husband said I'm the only one with a problem, so he won't go. I asked him to please tell me what was bothering him then, so we can work through it. In a nutshell, he is pissed I didn't want to quit my job and be a stay-at-home mum for Lizzie, but I do for our son, and so therefore I love our son more, and that makes me a terrible person. I explained like I had before. I didn't want to quit my job and be dependent on a man I wasn't married to. He got very defensive and said it's clear I've never trusted him, and then that makes me a bad wife and mother. I asked why didn't he quit his job and then be a stay-at-home dad. He blustered a bit and responded he makes more, which is true, and children need a mum during the early years more than a dad. He also said that Lizzie never had the experience of a stay-at-home mum. Then our son shouldn't have the favoritism of getting it either because it wasn't fair to Lizzie. I said it was ridiculous to punish me and our son for being unable to travel back in time and change the uterus Lizzie was conceived in. I said infants need a lot more care than pre-K kids. That opened up a whole can of other worms with my husband, resents me for not quitting work and being a full-time stay-at-home mum, and that if I'm going to do something I should do it fully engaged. What? He then went on and on about how I'm breaking our agreement for me not to be a stay-at-home parent and how that makes me unstable. I pointed out I have a right to change my mind and I won't give my baby to a stranger to raise while fretting about him all day at the office. I said I was very willing to do more things with Lizzie, like take her to the zoo and museums with a baby, get involved at PTA at her school, and go to a sporting event so me and her brother can watch her while she practices. I said this is healthy for all the children, and he had a warped view of justice and fairness by depriving our children of a healthy environment, because Lizzie's mum was an unfit parent. I said his guilt won't go away by taking opportunities away from our kids, and that I was willing to work out whatever issues there were and go to a counsellor and speak to the child psychologist and other professionals that could give him an unbiased professional opinion. No, he became violently angry again and said I was going back to work 2 weeks after birth, and that was the end of the discussion. That I had my chance to be a stay-at-home mum, and since I didn't take it for Lizzie when I could, I wasn't allowed to do it now, since he wouldn't let me. Now, as much as I love my husband and our children, I will not be controlled. I will not be told where I can and can't work. I will not be told if I can or can't work. I'm not a dog, I am not a slave. I will not be told to deny my own baby his mother and hand him to a stranger because his sister got a bad start in life. Purposely neglecting your own child opportunities in the name of fairness is insane. That is being a bad parent. The fact that my husband wanted to do this to me and my son flipped a switch in me. I stood up calmly and told my husband I was leaving, that he had crossed the line and I needed space from him, and that I would not subject any child of mine to this kind of abusive, controlling environment. I said when things calm down we can go to marriage counselling, because he clearly has deep-seated issues that need to be worked out. He became hysterical and said I can't leave, that we have a family, that I can't take his son, etc, etc. I was just done by that point. I said that for once he will take Lizzie to school and I will leave during that time. I went to our room and started packing. He started throwing my clothes out of the suitcase and screaming at me. I was honestly pretty terrified. I'd never seen my husband like this. I told him if he tries to prevent me from going or touches me in any way, I would be calling the police. I also said I was calling my mother to come and get me. Maybe it was an overreaction, but I was scared senseless and I just wanted to get myself and my son away from it. He started crying really hard, just sobbing, and walked away. I called my mother and said she needed to come and get me immediately, that I didn't feel safe and I needed to stay with her for a bit. I quickly packed what I needed and my mum came and got me. I've been with her for about 5 days now and I just feel numb. I can't believe how fast this all happened and how my family and marriage got turned upside down in just a few days. I wish I had never brought up being a stay-at-home parent. If I hadn't, this would never have happened. My husband and I were no contact for a couple of days and then he started texting and calling on day 3. Saying Lizzie has been crying for me and misses me. I've ascertained that Lizzie is safe. I know my husband would never mistreat her, but I spoke to her yesterday anyways and made sure she's being fed, going to school and doing her homework. She was crying and asked me when I'm coming back, and I didn't know what to say to that, so I said I didn't know, but I love her very much. I told my husband to stop using Lizzie as a pawn to manipulate me into coming back because it won't work. He actually said I'm proving I'm a terrible step-parent by not coming back and being there for her. I said that if I'm so terrible, he shouldn't want me back then, and to not speak to me again until he is ready to go to counselling and leave Lizzie out of our problems. I said if Lizzie is mentioned in any text or email, I will delete it without reading the rest of it. I said any phone call where he tries to bring her up outside the context of her being safe and taken care of, I will immediately hang up on. I said I do not want to talk to him right now, and he should figure out what he wants because I'm ready to file for divorce if he doesn't pull it together soon. My husband started crying again, but I just hung up because I was too exhausted to deal with any more that day. He's been silent since except for one text I got today saying he wants me back and misses me. I really don't know where to go from here. I'm still trying to process all of it, although writing it down here helps. I just can't believe my husband did all of this and I'm wondering if he just had a psychotic break. I'm wondering what red flags I've missed all this time and why I was stupid enough to marry and have a family with this guy, and how could I have been so blind? I want to divorce him, but I'm not ready to head for divorce court just yet. I want some space and time to process it all and see if my husband shows signs of wanting to go to counselling or trying to repair the damage done. If this was a one-time thing or if this is who he really is. I feel terrible for Lizzie. but I can't put myself or my son in jeopardy by moving back out of guilt. I'm being selfish right now and saying that my son and I are priority right now. I have to do what's best for my son. Update 2, 2.5 months later. Hi everyone, I know it's been a long time, but I just wanted to give a brief update while I still have time. I put small whales to shame with my current size, and my baby is ready to burst out of me in just a few weeks, although he technically could come any day now. So after my last post, my husband's brother and best friend went over there to figure out what the hell was going on. My boss was gracious and let me start maternity leave early, saying to take my time and figure out what I'm going to do. My job is ready for me when I come back, so they are taking really good care of me. I got a personal therapist because obvious reasons are obvious. I was a numb shell for a while, and one day I just broke and started crying and crying and crying and could not stop for the life of me. I don't think I've cried that hard ever in my life. My therapist has been a great part of my support system, guiding me through my issues and supporting my decisions. So as I said, my husband's brother and friend went over there to talk to him, and they told me that he told them he was pissed off I was breaking our previous agreement, and that he couldn't help but feel I didn't love Lizzie or that I loved our son more, and that maybe he made a mistake marrying me because now I was picking sides and being unstable, and that I had left when he told me to treat the children fairly because he didn't think our son should get a stay-at-home mum because Lizzie didn't. And they completely ripped into him. His best friend Craig asked him what the fuck he was on to come to such a ridiculous conclusion. He pointed out all that I've ever done for Lizzie, and that me being a part-time working stay-at-home mum would benefit her too, because I'd be able to do more things with her and spend more time with her. And also that he was a moron and I was smart and clearly not after his money, because I could have been a stay-at-home mum for just her and let him be the sole financial provider, but I didn't. His brother Daniel was even more blunt. Daniel called my husband an arsehole and a douchebag and said point blank that he didn't deserve me. He said my husband was being a controlling jerk and punishing me for his bitch of an ex-wife he shouldn't have married and reproduced with in the first place. Apparently there is a lot of family anger on my husband's side for him marrying and having a kid with his ex-wife, and I won't go into it. Anyway, Daniel said I was the best thing to ever happen to him, my husband, and Lizzie, and he was ruining it with his own two hands, and he better man the fuck up and get over his ex and start treating me better and appreciating me more. And that he was being a shitty parent to Lizzie and our son by thinking that forcing me to return to work was okay because that made it fair, and that I was a far better mother to Lizzie than his ex ever was, and I did a damn good job of showing my love for her. I wrote that my husband started texting me in my last post, and then he started blowing up my phone, begging me to come back, that he couldn't function, etc. He also broke my rule and said Lizzie wasn't doing well without me, which really angered me and broke my heart because I love that little girl, but it felt so manipulative. I basically told my husband if he continues to use Lizzie as a reason I should come back, I would be filing for divorce because I would not be with someone who uses a child as a manipulative tool, and that I didn't want to be a replacement mum for Lizzie. I wanted to be his wife and have a family with him that included Lizzie. I said get a therapist and intercouples counselling with me, or he would be getting divorce papers because I will not have my son in a toxic, controlling environment. My husband agreed to both, saying he couldn't live without me and he knew he needed help. Our couples therapist was great. She touched on all the issues I wrote about and tried to get my husband to see he was being unfair and controlling, and that, while it was understandable he would have a lot of fear and pain from his previous marriage, it was cruel to take out his issues on me because I have never wronged him and was not his ex-wife. So why was he making me pay for what she did to him? It basically boiled down to my husband being afraid of becoming like his ex, and that I would favour our son and hurt his daughter or love her anymore. The therapist touched on the issue of his kid versus my and our kid. She said my husband needed to keep in mind that it is natural to feel more connected and attached to a biological children as opposed to stepchildren. She told my husband that while both Lizzie and our son were his children, this was not the case for me, and not only was that natural and expected, it was okay. She asked, had I not been loving and kind with Lizzie? Had I not taken care of her? Did I go out of my way and sacrifice for her, as any other parent would do? My parent replied hesitantly but positively to all the questions. So she said then there was nothing wrong with my feelings or changing my mind, as long as I continued to treat Lizzie with love, respect and kindness, that there wasn't a problem. She also pointed out that while he might be affronted because Lizzie is also his biological child, it was not fair for him to expect I feel the same love and connection to her as he did. That it was in fact impossible because I had not carried her, gave birth to her, nursed her, and didn't come into my life until she was already a little girl. She said there are many kinds of love, and me having this special bond with the baby and wanting to stay home and nest was not only natural, it didn't mean I had lost any maternal love for Lizzie. That it wasn't less or wrong or unfair, just different, and that was one of the biggest mistakes biological parents make with step-parents is guilting or bullying them about their feelings towards stepchildren versus biological children, and insisting it has to be exactly the same. She said that while it is also natural and protective instinct, that the biological parent actually ends up being the one causing friction and tension and making both step-parents and child feel inferior, and if care isn't taken, the stepchild can end up being the favoured one, because the biological parent tries to make up for favouritism they believe exists. This was starting to be my feeling. She wrapped up by saying parents even tend to have favourites among biological children, but that the key was not to act on that or make it obvious, and that was what I was doing, and that it sounded like I had done a great job so far. And that we were ahead of the game because Lizzie was excited about the pregnancy and had a very positive and close relationship with me. My husband tried to argue, saying me staying at home with our son, but not her, was blatant favoritism. The therapist countered with many of the points made in the last post. 1. That I was not in a place in my career at the time to work from home. I'd have had to quit my job at the time in order to do so. 2. I was not in a place in our relationship to be a stay-at-home mum. I was not yet married and didn't feel comfortable giving up all my financial security without being married. 3. That Lizzie was already ready to be in preschool. She wasn't an infant, and that most people wouldn't give up a career they loved to stay at home full-time to a child that didn't need full-time care, and that they had no biological connection to. 4. Lizzie wouldn't know the difference because she was old enough to know I wasn't her mother and didn't come into the picture until she was past the baby and toddler stage, and that even small children can understand babies need more care than preschoolers, especially if it is explained calmly to them. In short, she said the fact I was more than happy to spend more time with Lizzie, wanted her to be in the baby's life, wasn't being territorial or aggressive about the pregnancy, and was still taking an active role in Lizzie's life, were very good signs, and that were in fact doing much better than many stepfamilies in our position. I'm sorry to say my husband tried, but just couldn't accept it. We tried going on family outings more in therapy, but he backed out saying he felt he was being ganged up on and that no one was on his side. He simply couldn't see why I should stay at home to work with the baby. I asked point blank if he even wanted the baby, and seemed shocked and said of course he did. He just wanted to make sure his daughter got what was owed to her. In the end, he refused to compromise, and frankly, I saw it as being blatantly unfair and cruel to our son to insist he had to be put in daycare or given to a nanny or au pair, all in the name of fairness, despite both his therapist and ours explaining fairness does not always mean equality. It's like he didn't want to see how me being a stay-at-home mum would also greatly benefit his daughter. I think my husband expected me to cave. All it did was make me lose love and affection for him, especially when he quit therapy. I warned him if he did or tried to insist on having his way, I would be filing for, at the very least, legal separation. I think he thought I was bluffing, because when nothing changed I went straight to the attorney's office. He was completely shocked when I had him served. I have arranged a semi-formal custody arrangement. I will keep the working from home arrangement while staying with my parents. My husband is not allowed to be in the birthing room when I go into labour. He has to stay in the waiting room. He can see and hold our son, but he will have to do it while I am there with someone else there. I insisted on this because I am very frankly afraid now of my husband and do not trust him at all. My husband is consumed with shock and grief. His family is furious with him and completely supports me, although of course they are very upset by the whole thing. I have told all of his family they are more than welcome to come to the birth and hold the baby. In fact, I want them there so they can supervise my husband with the baby so he doesn't do something horrible. My husband texts and calls and emails me constantly. He says he can't believe I'm doing this. Why can't I listen to him and understand him? Please come back and be a family again, etc. I've told him he needs to get back into therapy and that I need to be able to trust him with our son, and that trust will only come when I see a change in his attitude regarding our son and my stepdaughter, and that I need to feel like a wife to him and not just a mum to Lizzie. I love Lizzie, I truly do. I cry every day over losing her, but I didn't marry my husband to be her mum, although I knew that was part of the package deal. I did it because I loved my husband and wanted a life with him. Lizzie calls me often and I talk to her. I've seen her a few times since this fiasco. Her father is not allowed to talk to her to me because I feel he's being manipulative, but I don't want to cut Lizzie out cold turkey either. I love that girl, I truly do, and I've cried so many tears over her going through this. I tell Lizzie I love her so much that none of this is her fault and that I'm doing the best I can to make things work. I tell her I still want her to be in my life and her brother's life and that she's the best bonus daughter and sister in the world. I've heard from my husband's family. Lizzie has not taken our separation well and has even screamed at her dad for making both of my mummies leave. I've been afraid Lizzie would hate me for this, but in fact, just the opposite has happened. Her grades are failing, she's depressed and she cries all the time and has become very disrespectful to her dad. I've begged my husband to please get that girl counselling, and he has, which has been helping her. The guilt I feel is overwhelming and crushing. I feel like I've single-handedly destroyed my family, but I know I am making the right decision by sticking to my guns and insisting I be treated with love and respect and that my husband do the same for both of the kids. I can't fix him, and if he's unwilling to get help for his issues, I have no future with him. I'm not willing to go for divorce yet, hence the legal separation. My husband insists he wants this to work. I said I need to see changes in his life, starting with him getting back into therapy. I want to save my marriage, but I've done all I can, and if my husband won't do his part, there's nothing I can do except move on. I've told my husband if he has not gotten therapy by the time our son is a month old, I will be filing for divorce, and that if he abuses me, hurts me, or even thinks of dating other people again, I will be filing for divorce. All in all, a sad update, but one that is a type of catharsis for me, so I thought I would share. Thank you to everyone who's given me such great advice and support before. You are all wonderful. Sorry this was so long and couldn't be better news. And whilst I'd like the final conclusion about what happens in the very end, I just don't think it's going to be there. So I guess the conclusion we take out of this one is that, the husband is either going to shape up or not. From the information that I've seen here, I'm not sure if I can see it. The way he keeps going back, I don't think he's ever going to get over those feelings of favoritism. It just doesn't feel like it. Maybe he will with therapy, I don't know. And a brief overview of the comments on that post was just like they're concerned for OP's safety and all this kind of stuff. And for myself, I didn't really have that feeling in the end of it, because I think OP does have a wonderful support system around them. From even, husband's side of the family, they're supporting them as well. And she sounds like very of sound mind, so she will utilize those support systems where possible, like counseling, family, friends, etc. And I think that's the way to get through it. And her work as well has been wonderful with her. And there was just one comment on there that touched into what the last relationship was like for the husband. And the comment briefly mentioned that, he could be emotionally scarred by Lizzie's mother and then BPD tendencies and stuff. And OP replied saying, that could be very, very true. His wife completely fucked him and his daughter up. I felt and still feel so awful for what his ex put them through. It was really awful. This is why I'm not immediately off to the divorce attorney's office. My husband has always been wonderful until the pregnancy. I actually have compassion on my husband, despite being furiously angry with him, because I think he is so scared. He's reading into every little thing to try and avoid what happened with his ex, or he can't help but do so because of mental and emotional scars. We both thought he was over it when we married, but I guess the pregnancy drudged up old wounds. I will not be going back until we go to counselling together and he gets his own private therapist. There's just no way. I need time for myself to recover from everything and process. Thank you for your comment. It's very helpful and I agree pretty much with everything you wrote. As always, a huge thank you for spending 20 to 30 minutes with me today, getting involved in the channel, the stories, liking, subscribing, all that good stuff. It really helps out. And I can never express a difference you really do make, honestly. Each and every one of you make an absolute massive difference. And without you, I wouldn't be here reading today. So thank you so much for your love, time, and support. And I will see you in the next one. I appreciate you.